capacity, he spends his time providing outreach and education to the legal community and assisting attorneys as they struggle with substance abuse and related challenges that threaten their ability and/or eligibility to practice law. Welcome, David.
Hey everybody, can you hear me okay? Yep. Thanks for having me today. I'm nearsighted, so I always put these on just to make sure everybody's out there. And then I take them off so I don't have to worry about who's reacting in what way. It's a whole, I learned that a long time ago. You're just a blur now. So I am here because I am privileged to work for an organization called The Other Bar. And if you haven't heard of us, we have one of our lovely little brochures on the tables. I hope you'll take a look at it. What we are is a statewide organization. We're voluntary, we're confidential, we're nonprofit, we're free, and we have one purpose, which is to help attorneys who are struggling with addictions to alcohol, drugs, behaviors, gambling, anything that's hurting their career, their health. We've been around for 40 years. We have about 1,000 members statewide. You'd be surprised who some of our members are. One of them is a guy named Jim Heiding, who was our president 10 years ago, but he was your president 5 years ago. He was the president of the state bar for a year. He's a recovering alcoholic who's in our group. We print these. We do a lot of these MCLEs to try to get our message out. And we have meetings every week in 32 cities in California. And we have spring and fall retreat. And then maybe most importantly, we run a 24-hour hotline. There's an 800, we have a website, and there's a 24-hour hotline. The 800 number is on the pamphlet that you have. We're at otherbar.org. And so that's why I'm here. Now, let's talk about why you're here. You're here because there's a substance abuse requirement. And you have to listen to me. Everybody hates this unit. I understand that. So I try to make it as painless as possible. So I'll start off by assuring you that by listening to me for an hour, you will fully satisfy your substance abuse requirement, which is kind of good. I spent about 20 years trying to fully satisfy my substance abuse requirement, and I never could quite get it done. So, but that begs the question, why is there a substance abuse requirement? Most of these are electives, and you take whatever area is your area of practice, and you get the updates on the statutory case law, practice tips, etc. But there's a few you have to take. This is one of them. So the question is why? And the answer is that we have a bigger problem with addiction in the legal profession than we do in the general population. And when we have this problem, it's worse than it is when some other segments of the population have this problem. So it seems counterintuitive, why do we have this big problem? And I'll get to that. But just to prove that we do have the problem, there's a lot of statistics out there, and the generally accepted numbers are that in the overall population, 10 to 11% of people will succumb to addiction in the course of their lifetime in some form or another. And the corresponding estimate for the legal profession is 17 to 18%, which is not just a little notch higher. That's 1.5 times higher. And that means 1 out of 6 or 7 attorneys, which is a frightening number. So, and then you have the fact that when we are dysfunctional, there are severe consequences. This barista at your Starbucks ends up being an alcoholic. He may screw up your latte. He may steal $100 from the cash register. But if you are a dysfunctional alcoholic, you know, the things that you can do wrong are going to have concentric circles of consequences in society that cost time and money and grief and litigation. You know, think about it. At any given time, most attorneys have a list of clients. But at any given time, most normal people have one attorney, and whatever it is that you're working on for them is the most important thing going on in their life. Whether it's their divorce, whether it's their incorporation, there's some big transaction, their estate plan, they have a kid who's in trouble, you're trying to keep the kid out of prison. Whatever it is, it's really a huge consequence to your client. So when we're dysfunctional, it has a bigger effect than it does when some other, occupation categories are dysfunctional. You all get the California Lawyer magazine, right? Yeah, every month, right? Anybody want to admit to your guilty pleasure when you first get the California Lawyer magazine? What do? You thumb back there in the train wreck section, right? Discipline. getting to that age where I understand this now because I read the obituaries in the newspaper. It's the same basic idea, right? Oh my God, they're for the grace. Who are these people? They're all done all this bad stuff. You know, I have good news and bad news. The good news is there are not that many incompetent, evil, dishonest, bad guy attorneys in the state of California, in spite of that section of that magazine. The bad news is there are a lot of impaired attorneys. And this is a number from the state bar itself. 70% of the people who end up in the back of that magazine have an underlying problem with drugs or alcohol. So the best way to stay out of there is to stay away from addiction and not succumb to the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction. So, speaking of our profession, a couple of quick little numbers. There's this famous Johns Hopkins study done years ago, very well regarded. They studied 12,000 people over the course of a lot of years and found out a lot of things about them. And one of the things they did was divide everybody into 109 occupations and professions, and then they rated them on different characteristics. And for our purposes, some of the significant ones are the following. Clinical depression. We come in first. The legal profession is number one in rate of clinical depression. Above everybody. Above doctors who were second. Above dentists who were third, which puzzled me. I figured dentists get so much pleasure from inflicting pain that they're immune to this, you know, apparently. Our rate of clinical depression was 3.5 times the average rate of the entire study group out of 12,000 people. 3.5 times more likely for us to be clinically depressed than you know, Joe Blow on the street. That's phenomenal. They asked everybody this question: if you could do something else for a living at this point in your life, would you? And over half of the attorneys said yes. So that's kind of a little bit disturbing, and it gives you some idea as to why we might have this problem as much as we do. I'm going to talk about the disease of addiction and the brain chemistry a little bit, because it's just very hard for people to understand this disease. It's just very weird and perverse and kind of unique, and I find it fascinating. Because when you see this, what you're watching is somebody who's engaging in ostensibly voluntary behavior that is harming them and ultimately maybe destroying their life and causing irreversible damage and killing them. And why would anybody do that? I mean, our whole point is to take care of ourselves and survive and thrive. And yet, when people are addicted, they do the exact opposite. And it's not even the same as being a risk taker, you know, a parachuter or a cliff, you know, rock climber or something. This seems like just so weird. Why would somebody do this to themselves? So I'm going to try to help you wrap your head around this. Alcoholism and addiction. Alcoholism is a subset of addiction. It's just addiction to the drug alcohol. But addiction is a disease according to the AMA, which means that you have rights if you're an addict or an alcoholic. Of all people, attorneys tend not to know this. So we don't get to seek help as soon as we should because we're worried about our reputation, it's considered a moral failing, et cetera, et cetera. And when somebody is an addict or an alcoholic, it is unattractive. Their behavior is not good. But it turns out that's a symptom of the disease. It is not what makes them have the disease, typically. So this disease, by the way, so that means that it's indistinguishable from HIV if you have this disease. You cannot be terminated from your job for being an alcoholic. Now, if you have job performance issues because you're impaired at work, obviously you can. But if you go to your HR department with a letter from your physician diagnosing you with substance abuse disorder, you have a right to privacy, you have a right to take time off work, you qualify for state medical disability, and frequently your insurance will pay for the treatment. And you have a right to come back to work. And nobody but the HR person has a right to know why you were gone unless you choose to tell them. We don't know that. This disease is chronic, progressive, and fatal. And chronic means there's no cure, so once you have it, you have it. It's like cancer, it's like being a heart patient, it's like being a diabetic. In each of those cases, you get the treatment, you do what you need to do, and you put your disease in remission if you're lucky. You know, chemo, radiation, surgery, bypass, insulin, whatever it is in each case. But in each case, you're also responsible for some ongoing maintenance and the employment of some tools to keep your disease in remission. If you're a heart patient, you have to watch your cholesterol, your blood pressure. If you're diabetic, your sugar, your insulin, your diet, etc. If you're an addict till the day you die. You're never cured. And if you forget this, and forget to employ the tools you need to keep your disease in remission, you come out of remission, and in this case it's called a relapse. So people like Lindsay Lohan, she's an addict. She doesn't get that she's got a chronic disease, so she goes to some cliffside Malibu treatment program and gets a mani and a pedi and plays volleyball and swims in the lap pool and tweets to all her friends for 28 days without having a drink. And then to celebrate, she goes up to Sunset Boulevard, does shots of Stoli with her friends, and she's immediately come out of remission and relapsed, and that's why she has criminal prosecutions going simultaneously on both coasts. So it's a chronic disease. It's also progressive. Progressive means that left alone it gets worse, it doesn't get better. And this distinguishes it from a lot of things we get, most notably the common cold and the flu, which start off mild, and then they follow an upward trajectory, a bell curve, and they peak in severity, and then you just wait, and time passes, your immune system works, and they diminish and go away. Addiction is not like that. It's progressive, which means it keeps getting worse. Upward trajectory, and by the way, it starts off very, very slowly, so people can't see it coming until it's too late, and then it starts going upward. And something has to happen, or it won't just go away. There has to be an intervening event, something has to happen, or the person will end up at the last characteristic of the disease, which is that it's fatal. It kills people. Heart attacks, cirrhosis, strokes, overdoses, any number of ways it kills people. Car accidents. So, not a good thing to have. When you have this disease, at first you have a craving for whatever the substance is, whether it's alcohol or cocaine. Then bad stuff starts to happen, and you continue to use the substance in spite of adverse consequences. And finally, when you're a full-blown addict, you have lost control. So you can't quit once you're an addict. And this explains the bewildering phenomenon of the alcoholic that you see, who's always drunk and is a mess, and you say, my God, why doesn't he quit? Why doesn't he stop? He doesn't stop because he's an alcoholic, and he has a disease, the primary symptom of which is loss of control. So he can't. That would be bad enough, but most alcoholics and addicts don't even recognize that they have the disease, which is extra problematic. And that's because of a psychological phenomenon called denial. You know, people think denial is lying. You confront somebody, you're an alcoholic, and they say, no, I'm not, and they're lying. The bad thing is when they say, no, I'm not, they're speaking their own personal truth. They believe what they're saying, and that's denial. It's this complex, multi-layered phenomenon, and it has to do with a number of components, but the main ones are these. The person who was an alcoholic started off normal, now they're what you see, but they can't see that because it's a slow, gradual process. And it's been happening, and they've slowly been defending every downward increment as it goes on. And the best way to think about this is if you go home and look in the mirror tonight and look at yourself, and then look at yourself again tomorrow, you're going to see the same person. But if you take a cell phone picture of yourself in the mirror and then take another picture 15 years from now, you're going to see a different person. Well, when you ask an alcoholic to recognize that 15-year picture, they don't have the advantage of juxtaposing those images. So that's one reason they deny it. Another reason they deny it is that you're asking them to be objective about themselves, and nobody can be objective about themselves. By definition, we are our own subjects. Forget it, you can't be objective about yourself. Thirdly, though, and maybe most significantly, an alcoholic is always impaired, so their judgment is bad. They're either under the influence, or they're in acute withdrawals and hungover, or they're under the influence. So they have bad judgment. You combine these three things, and you have denial, which is one of many, many uniquely perverse attributes of the disease of addiction. So this is a brain disease. And once you have this disease, your brain has become your enemy. Your brain is your enemy, and is trying to kill you. Now, your brain is supposed to be your friend. Its whole function is to keep you alive and help you survive. And the brain is about the most powerful thing I know of that we can prove anyway. It harnessed electricity to put the lights in this room. You know, it invented these things. Believe it or not, I guess these aren't smarter than us because we invented them. All the jurisprudence in your law library shelves is a product of the human brain. When your brain's your friend, you have a very powerful, potent friend. But in addiction, your brain has become your mortal enemy. And I don't know how to wrap your head around that, but one thing you might want to do is go home tonight and look in the mirror and try to see your brain through your eyes, you know, the portal to your soul. Maybe you can see your brain too. My brain is now my enemy. I'm an addict. What am I up against? What do I know about my brain? I'll tell you one thing about your brain. It's just as smart as you are. You know what else though? It knows everything you're thinking. So when you end up going one-on-one with your own brain, it has an advantage, and it's trying to kill you. And that's why you can't do this on your own once you have this problem. You need help, treatment. You know, the next smartest animals on the planet are probably the great apes and the dolphins, and they do not have to deal with the temptation that we have to deal with, which is to introduce a chemical into our brain to change the way we feel and how we function. And they're better off than we are, it turns out, in that regard. So drugs cause this brain disease. It's really bad to have it, so why would anybody have this disease, right? Why the hell would anybody have this if it's so bad? And that's a good question, but it's the wrong question because it implies that it's a choice. And it isn't a choice. People do not decide to be alcoholics. I have yet to meet somebody who runs out on the street waving his bar exam results and screaming gleefully, "Yeehaw, I'm an attorney, I'm going to become an alcoholic," to celebrate. People do not make a decision like that. Why would anybody? A fatal disease, nobody chooses that. What people choose is to take an incremental step and introduce a chemical into their brain and interfere with their brain chemistry in a way that we weren't meant to be able to do, and it ends up having terrible consequences. So, there's another word for drugs, by the way, and the word is medicine. And some drugs are illegal and others come from the pharmacy, but I will tell you that of the hundreds of addicts and alcoholics I've worked with since I've been a rehab counselor, all of them refer to whatever it is that ended up being their big, huge problem as something they thought of as their medicine when they started. It helped them. It was their performance enhancer. It was their little friend, whatever it was. And I want to ask you guys 3 questions. Who had a cup of coffee this morning? Yes, we are all coffee achievers. Who has a cup of coffee every morning? Okay. Who, if you couldn't get your cup of coffee tomorrow, would have a mild headache and a little bit of trouble functioning? Wow. We have dozens of drug addicts in this room. Caffeine is a consciousness-altering drug. It's the active ingredient in coffee. And what you would feel tomorrow without your cup of Java in the morning is mild withdrawal symptoms. Now, caffeine is also the most widely used drug on the planet, and there are some good reasons for that. 1, it's legal. 2, it's cheap. 3, it's very good at doing what we want it to do, which is give us that little lift. 4, it's only mildly addictive. But 5, and most importantly, the side effects are very benign. So even if you have a hellacious coffee habit, you're drinking a dozen cups a day, you're not going to go to jail. You're not going to get a divorce, I don't think. And don't blame it on the coffee. You may run a big bill up at Pete's and have bad breath or something, but it's not too bad. Well, it turns out that a lot of other drugs, the temptation to take them is they're just like coffee, but they have really bad side effects, and they're more addictive than coffee. By the way, who enjoyed the taste of coffee the first time you had a cup of coffee? There are reliably always several weirdos in the room. Most of us don't like it, but we learn to like it because we like the way it makes us feel. And most of us don't like the taste of alcohol the first time we have it, but we learn to like it because we like the way it makes us feel. And I don't know anybody who enjoyed the first time they inhaled a lungful of cigarette smoke who liked it, but they learned to like it because of that nicotine buzz. So you all can wrap your head around the idea of putting something in your body to change the way you feel, then you are very conversant with what starts people on the road to addiction. The problem is that you take a chemical shortcut and it's going to likely end up in a dead end. We weren't intended to interfere with our brain chemistry. And when we take a drug, we change our neurotransmitters and we mess with our reward system, and it just goes badly. By the way, step back a minute. I think I call drugs chemical shortcuts, and there's 4 basic shortcuts. Up, which is more energy, stimulants, and there's down, relaxation, depressants, stimulants, coffee, 5-hour energy drinks, cocaine, amphetamine. Down, alcohol, Valium, narcotics, heroin. And there's around, which is escape. And those are things like marijuana and LSD and ecstasy. And then there's the off switch. Go to sleep, and that's Ambien, cholesterol, stuff like that. Trazodone. So in each case, those are legitimate things to want to do. Get more energy, relax, go to sleep, escape. And there are healthy ways to do those things. But in each case, there are unhealthy shortcut ways to do them, because the healthy ways take time and discipline and sometimes money. The shortcuts are instant. And once we do it, we go to these shortcuts, we're likely to be in trouble. Here's how it works. At the base of our skull is our limbic brain, and it's called the reptile brain for a reason. It's very primordial. It is responsible for our survival. It's powerful. It controls autonomic functions. It keeps you warm. It makes your heart beat and your lungs move. And it also rewards certain behavior that's good for you. And it ends up in addiction directly in opposition to your frontal cortex, which is your rational brain. This is where you do your thinking and write a brief. This thing is way more powerful than this. And when you try to reason your way out of addiction and your reptile brain has been convinced that whatever you're doing that's hurting you is something that you need for survival, the reptile brain prevails because it's the reptile. And you don't want to wrestle with an alligator. So here's how the reward system works. We have 3 neurotransmitters that basically have to do with our well-being and our functioning and our reward system, and they're norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. And in each case, we need to be at a certain level of these to feel okay, and then I'm going to pick a number, 5. You have to be at 5 to be all right. Now, if you're at 3 or 2 or 1 with these, you need prescription antidepressants. So people who don't have enough serotonin, those are the people who are depressed and they need to go get Zoloft for Prozac or whatever. So you start off at 5, and that's where you need to be. Dopamine is the main neurotransmitter involved in addiction, and it's the neurotransmitter of pleasure. And your reptile brain releases dopamine to reward behavior that it knows is good for you. So when something's pleasurable, it's because dopamine's been released. When you eat a good meal and it's satisfying, and you have an appetite for food, that's because the dopamine's released. Why? If you don't eat, you'll starve and you'll die. Sex is pleasurable because it releases dopamine, because if we do not engage in that behavior as a species, we will fail to reproduce and we will become a Darwinian footnote that will become extinct. When you take a drug of pleasure and addiction, whether it's alcohol, heroin, cocaine, or anything else, it releases dopamine, and it feels good. And your reptile brain does not know that it's not good for you with other things. So you have hijacked your reward system, and you've got your reward system that's very powerful, wanting to compel you to take something that ends up being bad for you. Amphetamines are the most powerful drug I know of. A full dose of crystal meth will cause a 20-fold increase in your dopamine level. 20-fold. So if you're at 5, it takes you to 100. Everybody I know who's ever done this drug, who's done cocaine and heroin, which are lower but similar, will tell you that it's the most unforgettable moment in their life. They did not know that such pleasure was possible. And frankly, there is no other possible way to experience this amount of pleasure. Food isn't going to do it. Sex isn't going to do it. You can combine them. It's not. You guys Seinfeld fans? George, right? George is trying to have sex while he's eating a Reuben sandwich and listening to a Yankees game on headphones. Even George is not going to get to 100. As I recall, he didn't get very far at all. What are you doing? Anyway, so people have this experience, and nothing bad happens the first time, and this is also a stimulant, so they have energy, and it's an ego boost, and they get work done, and then it wears off. And after it wears off, like any other rational person, they evaluate the experience, and they say, it felt amazing, I got a lot of work done, I cleaned the house, wrote a brief, nothing bad happened, and now I feel fine. And at this stage, even their frontal cortex, their rational brain says, no harm, no foul. Maybe I'll do that again. But the reptile brain says, wow, whatever that is, that feels so good, you must eat that stuff. You should start developing an appetite for that, just like you have for food and some other stuff. So that is how addiction, the seed, gets planted. Now here is the evil thing about it. There's a thing called habituation and a thing called dependence, and it works like this. You take any drug enough times, your body and your brain adjust. So the same amount of the drug doesn't have the same effect. I mean, everybody drinks more, and from then how they started at, you drink more coffee. They all work like this, but the highly addictive drugs really work like this. So you take the same amount, and instead of going to 100, you go to 70. If you only go to 70, you're going to be disappointed because you wanted to go to 100. Well, there's a solution for that. You take more to get to 100. Now, if you drink more coffee, it's not that big a problem, but if you're taking more methamphetamine, because the side effects are so terrible, it becomes a problem. Amongst the side effects of methamphetamine are long-term sleep deprivation, malnutrition, your teeth fall out, psychosis, paranoia. I've known methamphetamine addicts who develop a severe allergy to methamphetamine. They begin to break out in handcuffs. It's not So this drug has you taking more and more to get where you want to go. That would be bad enough. Here's the kicker, though. When it wears off initially, it leaves you at 5, which is where you started, and you feel fine. The same mechanism that makes you need more and more starts to drop you off at 3 or 2 or 1. And if you're at 3 or 2 or 1, you are paralyzed with something that feels like clinical depression, and you cannot function, and it's unbearable. So what people do, how am I going to fix this situation? I got an idea. I'll take a little bit of that stuff just to feel normal, to get back to 5. Now what do we have? You're taking it every day to feel normal. You're taking more and more to get the real bang for your buck when you want to go there. And you're a regular user, and it meets in the middle, and you're on your way to being an addict. So that's how it happens. Now, why do we have such a big problem in the legal profession? Seems like we should have less of a problem. Nothing too intractable. It just comes down to 2 things. It's our personalities and the profession. So, oops. Bad news for lawyers. There's such a thing as the attorney personality profile. We've been studying more than lab rats. There are just so many studies about lawyers. There's a very good book by a woman named Susan Dykoff. It's called Lawyer Know Thyself. Survey of all these studies. Am I the only one who feels like it's So, Susan Dykoff and other people have come up with an attorney personality profile, and I didn't make this up. And it's considered to be fairly valid. When you think about it, we have a lot in common. The things that draw us to the law, the things that we learn in law school, and what happens when we practice. You know, if I was a good artist, I would have become an artist. If I was a musician, I would have gone to Juilliard. If I didn't hate hospitals and the sight of blood, I might have become a doctor. But I was a smart guy who was a generalist who wanted to have a profession and make money, so I went to law school, you know, and other things. So here, I give a disclaimer now when I read off the attorney personality profile, too, because some people become offended. There are people who identify so much with being attorneys that I think they sleep with their suit and tie on, spooning a California Supreme Court reporter. And so they've raised objections to this list. So, disclaimer, we don't all have all these. Some of us don't have any of them, and there's nothing necessarily inherently bad with any of them. But together they create a profile. So this may not be you, but you might have gone to law school with this person. Personality of the attorney. Controlling. Ego-driven. High-achieving. Competitive. More comfortable with thoughts than feelings. Negative thinking. More motivated by external than internal rewards. These don't sound so great so far, right? Everybody likes this next one. Above average intelligence. Self-centered, compulsive, tending to be tense as opposed to relaxed. And finally, as we make our intrepid way through the enchanted forest of the legal profession, this is our lions, tigers, and bears. Argumentative, opinionated, and judgmental. Go on. So these last 3 sound kind of harsh. People have tried to argue with me about whether they're argumentative. I submitted that on the record. But if you think about it, we read briefs and we go to court in order to make our arguments. We do it to try to get a favorable judgment, and it comes in the form of an opinion. Argument, opinion, and judgment. It's how we process information. What's your argument going to be? Did you read the opinion? Did we get the judgment? Man, that's our trifecta. Controlling. People ask me what's the significance of that. I just got done saying that addicts have lost control. Well, here's the significance of that. If you're a full-blown addict, you've lost control. But if you're the type of personality who is tempted to take a chemical shortcut to instantly change the way you feel, you are, in fact, a very controlling personality. Because figuratively speaking, when you do this, you're trying to slap a dial on your brain that says up, down, around, off. and that's an act of extreme control. Well, if you take this list of personality traits and juxtapose it with a list of traits you will find in Addiction 101 to describe the average alcoholic or addict personality, you will not be able to tell the difference between the two lists, including above average intelligence. We are just addictive personalities by nature, so we're susceptible to begin with. Then the profession comes along. Oh boy, makes it worse. Why? Why? People helpfully suggest, well, it's stressful, that's it. And it's true, people self-medicate for stress, and it is stressful, but a lot of professions are stressful, right? So why this one? A couple things, I think. There's a lot of things. Actually, I could go on about what I see in the legal profession that makes people become sick with addiction for quite some time, but we don't have enough time, frankly, for me to talk about all of it. So I pick out a few of the big ones. The first one is a little weird, but it's the fact that we're so well paid. We make a lot of money, a lot of us, and our time is worth a lot. You know, and most people in most professions who make a lot of money, they do their job and they get their paycheck. They do their job and they get their paycheck. We do our job and bill by the hour and get our paycheck, and we have to justify that time. And we work at a big downtown law firm. They want 2,200 hours a year out of it. I don't know what a godly number it's at right now, but they do it in 6-minute segments, tenths of an hour. If they're billing your time at $400 or $500 an hour, that's 40 or 50 bucks every 6 minutes, all day, every week, every month, every year. 6 minutes. 6 minutes. 6 minutes. How long do I have to do that before you go crazy? It makes people nuts. 50 bucks. Did I earn it? Can I justify it? Is it adding up enough? You never have enough time. Your time is compressed under those circumstances. If people go to the bathroom and think about a case so they can bill it when they get back. I had a really good idea in there, 50 bucks. So, when you don't have enough time, you look for a shortcut. You know, if you routinely go between point A and point B and it takes you 20 minutes, and today you only have 15 minutes, maybe you look for a shortcut. And maybe you'll get lucky and find one. But maybe you'll hit a dead end. Well, a chemical shortcut, which becomes tempted under these circumstances, is almost guaranteed to be a dead end. And that's one of our problems in this profession. The next problem is this lovely thing we have called the adversarial system. You know, we go up against equally qualified professionals with great consequence, and somebody wins and somebody loses. And frequently the losers go home and don't get paid. And you know, our clients, it's not your fault, you did your job, it was a bad case, but they don't pay us to lose. So there's a lot of pressure. Now, who else does this? Doctors don't do this. They don't line up on opposing sides of the patient's gurney and debate the diagnosis and the treatment. And the big doctor with the white robe says, you guys are right, you stay here and do the surgery, you guys go home. But we do that. Who else does that? Professional athletes do that. And what do they have in professional sports? They have a big problem with performance-enhancing drugs. Because they want that edge, because they have to win. Well, it turns out we want the edge because we want to win too. They get tested, so they get caught. And when they get caught, they have to go to treatment. Alden Smith, San Francisco 49er, just got out of treatment. They get caught. Barry Bonds got caught. At the end of the NFL season last year, 9 players were on suspension for having tested positive for amphetamines. We don't get tested, so it gets worse for us. And by the way, attorneys, our home life will be a mess. Everything will be a mess. And the one place that we keep it together is work. That's the last place we let it show. So it gets worse for us than it has to before we can get better. You have to admit you have a problem before you can get help for the problem. Attorneys don't admit anything, right? We deny everything. You deny the request for admissions. You deny the allegations. You deny. I worked in this complex litigation firm as a paralegal a number of years ago, and my boss routinely made me deny our client's address. I guess it was hearsay, you know, they have to prove it. There's only 2 areas of human endeavor I know where the word denial is a term of art. One is the law and the other one's addiction psychology. So we have a problem here. Then you got the nature of this disease. You know, you come up to me and you say, I think you might be a diabetic. I'm going to say, really, why do you think that? Are you a diabetic? What's the test? What are the symptoms? Who's the doctor? What's the treatment? I don't want to be an untreated diabetic. But if you say, I think you might be an alcoholic, to anybody, you get a different response, right? Especially from an attorney. I used to work at Walden House in San Francisco. We go up to these people on the street to get them into treatment. It was easy. Dude, you smell bad. You're holding a cardboard sign. Come with me. Okay. They go with you. You put them, get them in a bed and have something to eat and give them treatment, and they get clean and sober. You know, not so much with the attorney. I get calls from the executive committees of big firms, and a managing partner is taking the whole firm down with his horrible behavior because he's drinking too much. And this guy used to be their hero and their mentor, and they're all afraid of him. And I get the job of approaching this guy and trying to solve his problem and the firm's problem. I'm letting him know he's an alcoholic and trying to get him into treatment. Oh my God. It's been suggested you might have a drinking problem and maybe even be an alcoholic. What? Am I hearing this right? Who the hell are you? Does he know who I am? I'm a partner at such and such and such. You don't look that hot. This is a $1,400 suit. I'm driving a Lexus. Drinking? Let me tell you about drinking. All I drink is Old Vine Red Zin. I have it shipped in by the case from Napa. $92 a bottle, and that's with the club member discount. I don't like cheese to match it up with. Why don't you come over to the place this weekend? We'll do a pairing. So he's got a chronic progressive fatal disease, and he wants me to come over for some cheese. That's the attorney alcoholic. So we have to prove it to them, you know, and if they finally admit it's a problem, then they think they're going to solve it themselves, because that's what we do. We solve other people's problems. We're the counselors. We don't have a problem. We don't go to counseling. I got this. I got it. Don't worry. Well, they think they have to control it. You know, well, if you're an addict or an alcoholic, you have lost control. So they spend 2 years paying $200 a week to some therapist while they try to control their drinking. They finally come back on their knees because they can't control it. All right, I guess you're right. Now what do I do? Well, it's typically a 28-day residential treatment program. What? You out of your mind? Have you seen my calendar? I can't go away for 28 days. I got an arbitration. I got depositions. Every attorney is too important to go away for 28 days. The world stops without any one of us. It's just, we can't go. I helpfully suggested were they to be in an accident and go into a coma for 28 days. When they came out of it, some miraculous societal mechanism would have kicked in to keep us all okay while they were gone. You know? But, man. Then once they decide they're going to go, you got to cover their calendar for them, and that becomes a problem. The good news is, finally, there's some good news for attorneys. Once we get in treatment, we do better than the average Joe does. And our outcomes are very good. We tend to succeed the first time, and there's some reasons for that. Among them are this: you put the guy with the cardboard sign sober back out on the street. I don't know about you, but if I'm holding a cardboard sign, I want to get drunk. So that's what he does. The attorney gets into treatment and gets some perspective and some clarity and evaluates the situation. Wow, you know, somebody called in a complaint to the state bar. My firm isn't very happy with me. They're talking about dissolving the partnership. There's a judge threatening to hold me in contempt. You know, my finances are a wreck. My health has been bad for a while. Maybe I should listen and learn and get better. So we do, which is great. So far, I have been speaking in hypotheticals: the disease, the personality, the profession. Now I'm going to do a case study, and I have Exhibit A in the case study, and I do this to try to make it real. And I do this because what I'm about to tell you is the truth. I'm certainly not proud of it, but it's the truth. And I learned this stuff the hard way, and I try to make it of use to somebody else. So I want to maybe give you a perspective and understanding of this disease that you don't already have. I want you to know what to look for, and I basically want to scare you, because you do not, believe me, want to go or to let anybody who you know or work with or care about or love go down the road that I went down, and the road that many addicts and alcoholics go down. Because this is a vicious, horrible, terrible brain disease to have. And when you suffer through it, you live in hell, and there's no way to get out. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So attorney addict, really, who would that be? Well, me. So who am I? Here's a couple things. Main point of this stuff is that up to a certain point, I was the least likely person to end up where I ended up. Totally the least likely person. You know, I grew up the middle son in a middle-class family in the Midwest, just straight down the middle suburb of Ohio. No dysfunction, no abuse in my home. I had no excuse like that. You're going to like this. My dad was an Allstate insurance agent, for God's sakes. So I was in good hands. Somebody's going to throw something at me for that. But like a lot of you, I was a congenital overachiever. You know, I saw the school crossing guards, and one of them had a gold badge. I was the captain. I wanted to be the captain. Student government got with the gavel. I wanted to be the president. Straight A's. Well, had to get those A's. I love the way they look. A B is ugly. An A. I love them. Had to keep the A's. Was on the football team. Was on the baseball team. Had a part in the school play. Sang in the choir. Honor roll. I was a Boy Scout. So what did I have to be? An Eagle Scout. That was this kid who I was, right? Apple in my parents' eye. Graduated from high school, the top of my class. Go to Ohio State University. And after 4 years, I graduated there with a perfect academic record, which, believe it or not, before grade inflation was a big deal. OSU had been in existence for about 150 years, cranking out 20,000 graduates a year. Not a great school, but not a bad school. And when I did this, my 4-point, I was the 104th person in the history of the school to ever do this. And so it generated a little article in the Columbus Dispatch, which my mother dutifully clipped out, framed, and put up on our suburban living room wall because the whole family was so proud of little Dave because he was going to be a lawyer and we never had a professional in our family before. Get out of college, ace the LSAT, get in a great law school, come to California, go to law school. Along the way, I clerked at some big firms, Jones Day, Squire Sanders, got offers, ended up interning in the public defender's office and loved it. Criminal defense, trial lawyer, in the trenches. This is what I saw on TV that made me want to be a lawyer when I was 12 years old. That's what I'm going to do. So that's what I did. I became a San Francisco public defender, and I was a true believer, and I was good at it, dedicated to it. And I did that for 4 years, and then I started my own practice. I did that for 8 years. So that's who I am. Now, here's who else I am. I am a recovering intravenous crystal methamphetamine addict. I am a convicted felon. I'm a disbarred California attorney. I am somebody who has spent 6 months of his life in a maximum security county jail wearing an orange jumpsuit. I am somebody who spent 11 months of his life in 3 different residential rehab programs. And ultimately, I spent 18 months homeless, destitute, drug addicted, and suicidal on the streets of San Francisco. So there's my resume. Now, how do you fit all that in one resume? There's a one-word explanation in my case, and the word is addiction. To a certain point, I was a little golden boy, and then I found my medicine, something that I felt helped me, my performance-enhancing drug, in my 3rd year of college, and I took it, and I started that addictive seed process going in my reward system in my brain, and it took 20 years before it almost killed me and it took away everything, because this is a patient disease, and that drug that you take becomes your best friend and waits. So you trust it, and you love it, and you rely on it, and it proves to you that it's good for you, and it's waiting to kill you. And when you know who your enemy is, that's easy, because you stay away from them. But when the thing that's going to kill you makes it their business to become your best friend, you're in a heap of trouble. I became best friends with a pill called Black Beauty in my 3rd year of college. It's an amphetamine. They had them in the dorms. And I took it to study for an econ exam because I was already tired from all-nighters from finals week and I had to keep these A's. So you want to ask why I became a drug addict? To get A's. There you go. A football player does it to score touchdowns. Nobody does it to live under a bridge. Took this pill, amphetamine boost, incredible pleasure, felt great, stimulated my nervous system. I was up all night, I studied, it made me feel smart, pumped up my ego, took the exam, got an A on the exam. I was a competitive runner. I ran 12 miles, my personal best time. When you're a runner, you need to stay thin and suppress my appetite. Wow, then it wore off. And it left me feeling normal. And I said, geez, that was amazing. Straight A, run fast, jump high, feel fine, nothing bad happened. I gotta go get some more of those pills. I got lots more exams I've got to take before I'm done with this college thing. So I started taking these pills, and I became a regular user of amphetamines. So that's how I started. And I said crystal meth though, right? That's a street drug. That's a long way from a pill. Street drugs are nasty. I was never going to use street drugs, but I did. What happened was I moved to California, I started law school, and there's no pills out here. So somebody gave me some crystal meth from a law student. And I switched to crystal meth because it was the only thing available. And I no longer could study or write a brief or a paper or do anything without this stuff. I've been doing it for 2 or 3 years at that point. So now I'm on crystal meth. Then I became an addict, and I needed it. And I was an addict, but I was a high-functioning addict for years. And I was a lawyer addict, so I argued, defended my behavior. Don't tell me there's anything wrong. Look how much money I'm. Look at my fancy car. Look at my practice. I'm winning cases. I'm not an addict. An addict needs it all the time. I just went 3 days without it, so I can't be an addict. I slept all 3 days. I just went scuba diving. I never heard of a scuba diver being a drug addict. Good argument, right? So that was my deal, And also, addicts were stupid people, and they were weak people, and I was smart and strong. And I could prove it. So, needles, though, intravenous crystal meth, damn, that's really nasty. How do you end up using needles? I was never going to do that. I ended up doing that too. One day I was in the habit of snorting a line of coke from my table before I took my files and went out to do battle in court every day. And the last thing I'd do after my coffee was snort this line, and I needed it to get out the door. One day I wake up with a horrible cold, a sinus infection, a sore throat, and I can't snort this line. I'm sitting there in the horns of this dilemma, and my girlfriend at the time comes down the steps. She sees what's going on. She was doing this stuff with me too. But she says, "What's the problem?" And I described the problem to her, and well, to my great fortune, it turns out that she was a nurse. Anybody know where this is going yet? She also had bad professional boundaries, and nurses are professional phlebotomists and have access to syringes, and in this case, she loved me. So she said, "All right, I will help you this time." And she took my medicine and put it in a syringe, and I held out my arm, and she expertly administered an intravenous hit of crystal methamphetamine. And I felt that, and it worked instantly, and I liked it. At this point, there was no drug addict who's going to go there and then go back, because it's progressive and it gets worse. I said, "Let's do this again tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow." And I never snorted crystal meth again from that point on. I was now an intravenous crystal methamphetamine addict and a practicing attorney. I have injected crystal meth in the bathroom in judges' chambers during a recess in the middle of a closing argument, and gone out and finished it and won the case. However, once I started shooting it, things started going bad pretty fast. After years of snorting it, I started shooting it, and it took 3 or 4 years until I was destitute. Shortly after I started using needles, I was at a client's house. I used to say, investigating a case, but who am I kidding? I was there buying drugs, I'm sure. And nasty place. And I see the door is hanging off the hinges of the bathroom, and there's this big burly guy, a Hell's Angel with a black leather vest and tattoos, and he's in the bathroom, bare light bulb hanging down, sticking a needle in his neck. That is absolutely revolting. I will never do that. And I ended up doing that too. By the way, a drug addict will do everything they say they're never going to do. It's just the truth. And in recovery, we say, you're in trouble when your behavior is going downhill faster than you can lower your standards. And when I did that, though, I did not have a light bulb. I did not have a door. I was in the dark in a tent in an abandoned railroad yard at the side of the San Francisco Bay. I was holding a flashlight between my knees, pointed at my neck. With my left hand, I was holding a broken piece of mirror I scrounged from a dump. And with my right hand, I was injecting my jugular vein with crystal methamphetamine, because that's where my performance-enhancing drug took this smart guy there. Along the way, consequences. Now, people, in order to get clean and sober, have to get humble and admit they have a problem and be willing to take the help. It's different for everybody. Some people get fired and they get clean and sober. I got fired from the public defender's office, my dream job. I went across the street, they found drugs in my desk. Went across the street, hung up my shingle, opened up my own practice. Within weeks, I was making more money than ever before and had more freedom. Hell with you guys. I just need to be more careful and not get caught. That's the only trouble for me. However, once I started shooting this stuff, I stopped making much money. I was losing weight. I was looking crazy. I got evicted from my house. I'm living in my office, and people are starting to look at me in the Hall of Justice after 12 years, like, what's wrong with him? And the police are watching me. And what happened was one of my clients informed on me. He was my personal dealer. He was in jail, and he told the police a lot of things about me, and they let him out of jail. At the same time I went in, he came out. And they got enough information for a warrant. They came over, they searched my office across the street from the Hall of Justice, and they found enough evidence to charge me with 4 felonies. And I'm sitting there for 4 hours handcuffed to my chair, wondering, why don't you guys take me across the street and push me? What are we waiting for? And I realized what we were waiting for when all the vans and the lights showed up outside. We were waiting for all the local network affiliates to get there with their TV cameras, so I could be pulled out of my office and do the perp walk on local Bay Area television about 30 times as a featured article that weekend on the news. The lawyer who got arrested across the street from the Hall of Justice for crystal meth. So I'm disgraced in front of the whole Bay Area community. I spend the night in jail. The next morning I enter a plea and get an OR in front of a judge who I'd known for 12 years. I had dinner at his house and played golf with him. The prosecutor was a buddy of mine, and they had to recuse themselves and bring in the city attorney. And I spent a year fighting 4 felonies, trying to stay out of state prison, and boy, did they want me to go to state prison. And ended up jail time, probation, fine, resigned from the bar with disciplinary charges pending, and court order treatment. 40 years old. I get out of that court order treatment, I am broke, I am homeless, I have no law license, I have felony convictions, and I'm still a drug addict. And I need this drug. Now I gotta get a job, I gotta work hard, I gotta recreate my life, I gotta find a place to live, I gotta go get some crystal meth. That's project number 1. Clearly, this is the brain of an addict. This stuff is what is destroying your life, and why you want to rebuild your life. What you do is go get some more of it. That's a serious brain disease. That's what I had, and that's what addicts have. So I ended up living in an old U-Haul truck on the streets of San Francisco in this abandoned railroad yard out by China Basin neighborhood near the bay where it's all built up now. This was before the stage was even there. All kinds of people in campers and tents and trailers living out there, all drug addicts, and I was one of them. I lived in this truck for 9 months. And while I'm there, nobody anymore knows or cares. My family, everybody's just written me off. I got a drug habit. I weigh 130 pounds, which is 55 pounds less than I weigh right now. I looked like an Auschwitz victim when I'm crazy out there. And I scrounged in dumpsters. I ate food out of dumpsters, day-old sandwiches behind from delis. I ate at every soup kitchen in San Francisco, Glide Memorial, St. Anthony's, a bunch of other ones that most people don't even know about. I scrapped metal and recycled in order to get drugs. I stole stuff, and I couldn't get out of there. I couldn't figure out what was going to happen. I couldn't get out of there. And it just kept grinding on and on. So the next big thing that happened is that one day after 9 months, I come back to my truck, and it was gone. Gone. City tow took it for unpaid parking tickets. And I didn't have much stuff left, but what I had in there, it was a Coleman stove and a cot. It was my house. So now I have no house. But here's some other things that you assume, you think, you hope you're never going to lose in your life. My family photograph album, gone. My law school diploma, my only copy of my undergraduate honors thesis, gone. A little shoebox with my Boy Scout merit badges and my Eagle Scout badge, gone. I had this bundle of letters between me and my girlfriend who I was with between the ages of 15 and 23. High school and law school sweetheart with a rubber band around it. A lot of sentimental value, right? Gone. My beloved German grandfather, Otto, I was his favorite, always, and I loved him. And before he died, he gave me this beautiful wooden-handled pocket knife to remember him by. Gone. Everything is gone. And I am 40 years old. I got a baseball cap and a leather backpack and a beat-up mountain bike and a drug habit and 60 cents in my pocket. And it's November, I have no place to live, and the winter's coming. And I still didn't realize that the first thing I should do is get off drugs. I stayed outside for the winter of 1997-98. It's the coldest, wettest winter on record. You can Google it, it's official. And I was wet for days at a time and shivering and hungry. And I slept under overhangs and loading docks. I slept in cardboard boxes. I slept in bushes. I sat up around campfires by the edge of the bay with other drug addicts all night long. And I learned some things they didn't teach me in law school. I learned that if you were sufficiently exhausted, you could be wet and cold and shivering, and you could still go to sleep. You just wake up later and you're still shivering. I learned what it's like to be so hungry that you're going down an alley and there's a loading dock from a bakery with a rack with cooling loaves of bread, and you smell the bread and you behave like a character in a Charles Dickens novel and run over like the Artful Dodger and grab a loaf of bread and run around the corner and then eat the whole thing because you're so hungry and you're on probation. You don't want to get caught or go to jail. I learned that there's no place else to get out of the wind and the rain. You can seek refuge underneath an SUV parked on Mission Street, and you crawl under the SUV and there's a little dry spot, and you can hunker down in there for a while. Mainly, though, I learned that it's not enough to want to die. You have to be able to kill yourself. And I wasn't able to do that. There's no place to sign up for an appointment with Dr. Kevorkian. So it just didn't end. And it just kept going. And I didn't know what to do. And it's the worst thing imaginable. I mean, imagine it and then think that it's worse. It was just ridiculous. And so here's what finally happened. They say in recovery you have to hit a bottom, you have to have an epiphany, it has to be some huge event to finally precipitate this brain change that makes you realize the reality of your situation and that you need help. Here's what did it for me. Because most people who end up homeless drug addicts shooting crystal meth die. And I clearly didn't. So my salvation came like this. At one point I had a tent and a sleeping bag outside of town. And I hiked in 3 miles to this residential neighborhood to where my buddy lived to see if he would let me sleep on his couch. And he wasn't home. And I stayed there a long time, and it got late, and he didn't come home. Rather than go back to my camp, it was a summer night, there was this sliding board in a playground with a sandbox and wooden structure around it right next to his house. It looked a lot better than a lot of places I spent the night. I just laid down on this sandbox on this sliding board and went to sleep in my jeans and my t-shirt. Well, if you know the summers in San Francisco, what happens at night frequently is the wind kicks up to about 30 miles an hour, and the fog rolls in, and the temperature drops, and that all happened, and I woke up at about 3 a.m., and I was soaking wet in my jeans and t-shirt, and all 130 pounds of me shivering uncontrollably, and I got up, and I started walking around the neighborhood trying to find something to use to get warm, cardboard, rag, blanket, garbage, jacket, something, and I could not find anything, and I had a complete and total break. I just broke it. And I remember being that guy screaming at the sky. I pull up with my fist balled up underneath the streetlight, screaming, with tears and water running down my face. One word. What? What? What has happened to me? What's going to happen to me? What can I do to get out of this? Now, I would like to say that there was a thunderbolt and a voice from the sky, but it wasn't quite like that. I calmed down. I go back to my buddy's house. His truck is now parked there, so I did yet another thing I was never going to do. I stole from a friend. I steal a painting tarp, drag it back to this sliding board, roll up in it, and get warm. So I'm going to sleep like this little speed freak burrito in this playground, all toasty. And when you see a homeless person sleeping, you always think, oh. And then when you wake up, it comes back. You realize who you are, and where you are, and what you've become, and what you have to deal with. You're homeless on the streets of San Francisco, and you've got to figure out how to get through this day and survive. It is the most devastating moment to go through. So when you go to sleep, you want to stay asleep. I went to sleep in my perch under there, and I remember thinking, this is a playground. I got to get up in the morning because there's going to be kids, moms, and if I don't get out of here, there's going to be cops. Don't want that. But I'm escaping. I'm in my dreams, and I can sense the kids and the birds out there. I'm not coming out. Eventually, something starts poking me in the side of my tarp, and it won't go away, and I try to ignore it, and it won't go away, and I finally stick my head out, and I'm looking up, squinting at the sky. There's this little blonde girl with her hair silhouetted against the blue sky that's like a halo around her head, like a little angel. And when my head sticks out, she jumps back and says, "Is he alive?" And then her mother comes over and says, "Matt's just sleeping, honey, you come away from there." And she's hauling her kid away. She says, "You didn't touch anything, did you? You better come and wash your hands." Good morning. Thank you very much. So it turns out there's 3 mothers, about 7 kids on their standard Saturday morning outing. They've all been taken off to the side, can't go on the sliding board because the man is there, which, if you know kids, makes the sliding board the most desirable piece of playground equipment there is. Can we go yet? Can we go yet? And all the man's there. I am mortified, angry, suicidal, depressed, drug addicted, and I am getting out, extricating myself from the tarp and dragging my sorry butt out of there. I pull on my baseball cap. And I'm leaving. And as I'm leaving, one of these mothers, God bless her, I don't know if I was supposed to hear her or not, but I did. She says to the kids, she decides to use me as a lesson in life. She points at me, she says, "So who knows what we need to do so we never have to live like that man?" And man, when I heard that, it pissed me off. You know what my addict brain told me to do? I didn't do. It was to turn on my heel and rip off my baseball cap and say, "Tell him not to go to Stanford Law School." It'll be fine. Thank God I had a second thought, because it is time for you to figure out what you need to do so you don't have to live like this anymore. 41 years old. That day, I hiked out to my third and final treatment program. No more volleyball, no more swimming pool. This one took me for my food stamps and my GA check. And I stayed there for 4 months, and I detoxed, and I became willing and teachable, and I learned what I needed to learn about behavioral tools and psychology of addiction to be able to get off of that drug and live without it for the first time in over 20 years. And that was about 15 years ago. And here I am. I don't know why, because most people who were where I was are dead. So I figure, what am I going to do about this? I will take my lemons and make lemonade. I know a lot about this already. I'll study it some more and become a drug and alcohol rehab counselor, try to help people. And that's what I have been doing. For the last 5 years, I've been working with the other bar. I'm almost done, guys. Bear with me. It's already rush hour traffic out there. You don't know where I'm going. And I do nothing but work with attorneys and their families and try to help them and keep them from going where I went. And you can help me do it. First, by taking care of yourself. You know, if the Bible says have it for me, it means you. You're not too smart. You're not too strong. If you already are having a little bit of a problem and you're in your 20s or 30s, it's progressive. It's going to get worse. Watch out. You're going to have a big problem. It took me till I was in my 40s. It takes some people who drink until they're in their 60s. Don't take these shortcuts. Insist on your right to treat yourself as a human being in spite of the fact that you're an attorney, and that's debatable. But more importantly, do the right thing when you see this in somebody else, because you know it when you see it. If somebody smells like alcohol at 8 in the morning, repeatedly, if they used to be on time, punctual, and now they're late, if they used to do good work and now they're doing bad work, if they used to be well-groomed and now they're sloppy, if they used to be affable and easy to get along with and now they're moody and angry, unexcused absences, that person's probably an alcoholic or an addict. So you know what we do as attorneys? Nothing. We don't do anything. Professional courtesy, we think we're going to harm them or conspire against them. So we just, at the most, we say, what about Jane? I don't know. Doesn't look too good. Yeah, let's keep an eye on it. Maybe she'll turn it around. Well, if Jane is an alcoholic or an addict, she has a progressive disease, she's lost control, and she won't turn it around. It will get worse unless there's an intervention and treatment. You don't know how to do an intervention and treatment, but I do. And I know a bunch of other people who do. And because you're not a barista at Starbucks, because you're in this profession, you have access to a toll-free hotline that you can call and talk to somebody. And you can remain anonymous and seek help for yourself. You can remain anonymous and seek help from somebody else. I answer this phone, I'll collect the information and call that person up and see if they'll take help from us. You know, I tell them who we are, what we do. We have a hotline that we're confidential, that we're free, and that I've received calls on our crisis line about people in the profession who are concerned about them. Now, as you can imagine, that's a cold phone call. People hang up on me, but they never forget that call. But sometimes they take the help, and we surround them. I say, I'll go out and meet them in person. We'll get them into treatment. We'll lend them money. We'll cover their court calendar, get them continuances while they go to get better. We invite them to our meetings. We don't have 1,000 members right now because it doesn't work. We have 1,000 members because it does work. And each one of those members will credit the other bar with saving their career or their life. So you can help us by making the call. You can help us in one other way, by keeping us in business. Now, you may not know this, but up until 6 years ago, we got money out of your state bar dues. And our budget was about $500,000 a year, which is not princely by legal standards, but it was great for us. And we had 5 consultants in the state doing what I'm doing. We no longer get that money. Our budget is 1/3 of what it used to be. And there's 1 consultant now, me. I live in Petaluma, and I'm theoretically to cover the whole state of California. We get our funding strictly from donations, voluntary contributions. We're a 501(c)(3). We get them from organizations like this. We don't charge for these things. We hope maybe people donate money. We get them from law firms, and every year we barely make our budget. We barely stay afloat. So here's once again, here's what we do. We print these. We answer the hotline. I use my own phone. I answer it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I travel all over the state. I drive my own car. I work out of my home office. I don't get paid that much. And we save lives. So please help us stay in business. To give you an idea of the dilemma we find ourselves in, let me run you through a quick little exercise here. When you go home tonight, turn on your TV. Pretty soon you're going to be watching a public service announcement. There's going to be a little girl with flies buzzing around her head. She's in a brown, tattered dress, scrounging through a dump. And it's heartbreaking. And right about that point, they switch to this comforting-looking guy with a white beard. He's got that little girl on his knee. Now she's clean and well-fed and looks great. And he says, won't you adopt a little girl like Maria here? and help us get her fed and clothed, and we'll bring fresh water and a school to her village. When you hit your remote, now you're going to be looking at a close-up of a dog's eyes. You see this one big teary eyes. The camera backs off. There's bars in front of the dog's face. And the camera backs off a little further, and the dog has a burn on his shoulder and emaciated ribs. And then they cut to the comforting woman, I believe it's Sarah McLaughlin, and the guitar music starts. And Sarah says, "For $11 a month, won't you please join the Humane Society and help us end animal abuse?" Well, close your eyes. This is Northern California. Visualize with me, if you will. You hit your remote one more time, and you're looking at a depiction of a disheveled guy in a three-piece suit passed out behind the desk. And on the desk is a spilled martini glass. And just when you're saying to yourself, "What the hell is this?" they cut to the comforting man with the white beard, and he says to you, "Won't you please adopt an alcoholic attorney?" We'll send you a photo of your attorney. And we'll have him write you a letter. Nobody is giving money to that last organization. Guess what? That last organization is the other bar. And we need you to help us stay in business. Because we save careers and lives. We're the only people doing what we do. We're a 501c3. You can hand me a check after this is over, made out to the other bar incorporated. I'll take it to our treasurer. You can go online. You can do it with a credit card, PayPal. Please help us do our work. I've never been more privileged or more proud of any work I've done than this, because I see it all the time. And it's important. We need to be able to keep doing it. Thank you so much for having me.